November 27th, 2018. Are we on? Awesome. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is operating. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of the Downtown Development Authority from October 23rd, 2018. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
Sure.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the October 23rd regular meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Those minutes are approved. Next is the minutes from the executive session meeting from October 23rd, 2018. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
Motion to approve the October 23rd executive session meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The executive meeting minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is the chairman's report. First item in the chairman's report is the Chamblee-Dunwoody auto collision update. The sheriff will be meeting me out at Chamblee-Dunwoody Collision on December 14th, 2018 to finalize the foreclosure of that property. Catherine, is there anything else?
Is he still in?
He's still there.
He's still there.
He knows
He knows it's coming.
Yeah. He knows. And now we have the two subtenants paying rent to us. His former subtenants are now our tenant.
Great. All right.
Are we pursuing anything beyond?
Just
So-
get a judgment?
We did. We got used a restraint proceeding to permit us to seize whatever items of non-real property are on the property at the time when the sheriff shows up. You still have to have the sheriff effect the eviction, but this means we don't have to do a second proceeding in order to seize those items. Now, I believe he's $40,000 or $50,000 behind, so we'll go into the building and see what's there, and
How
then
do we know?
Did we get a judgment on our back due rent?
yes.
That's what before.
Yes. And it's against him personally because he personally owned that business and he personally signed the lease. So once we get through this, we'll have to decide whether to pursue him personally to collect the back runs.
Okay.
I thought we might wait until after we see what's left there before we pursue that. Next item is the SLX inspections. So when we passed the incentive for the Nissan dealership, which is now SLX Atlanta or SLX Chamblee, whatever they call it, the requirements were that we put, or that they put luxury furnishings into the building, luxury finishings and furnishings. The property is getting close to completion. So in the next few days or weeks, we'll notify them that we need to inspect the property to make sure that they're building up to the standards that they promised us to do abatement. That's different than being a code inspection. It won't be carried out by the city. We will need to hire a private inspection service to do that. I have a couple of estimates coming in for what that would cost, and then we'll go ahead and get those inspections underway. Right? Last item is DDA board appointments. There are 5 of us up for reappointment. Leslie, Brian, myself, Van, and Ryan. Has everybody gotten their application paperwork in? Statement of interest?
No.
Okay.
But you have until December 15th and I will resend it to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you finished? That makes me bring up something. Is this the only time that this is gonna happen?
No.
Okay, so we need to figure out how to just do every 2 years, half and half.
So Dan and I had this conversation. So just to give you all some background, when we were formed in 2013, we were formed for staggered term limits. Ronnie and Mario served for 2, and then Ronnie was reappointed, and then Brian stepped into Mario's place. You two took over for Paige and John Boggs at the end of their 4-year term, for a 4-year term. You, me, and Van are coming at the end of our 6-year term, and whoever's appointed after us will be for a 4-year term. And what that creates is a numerical situation where 5 of us hit at the same time. So I did have a conversation, an email. Did we have a phone call?
Yeah, we talked about it.
Okay. Apparently this is all statutory. And so you can't change the way that the appointments are set up. Because I'm on the same page with you, I would have proposed that we go to city council and that we have the DDA agree with city council to change the terms and so that everything doesn't hit at the same time. And what would have been best, I actually did a spreadsheet on it, it would have been everybody do a 3-year term, years 1, 2, 3, and they never really meet up, 2, 2, and 20s. We can't make that change. That's not within our power to do so, shy of going to the legislature and having them amend via the statute. So we're kind of stuck with what we're stuck with.
So Dan, the way the rules are, the people with the 6-year terms, if they're reappointed, they're for a 4-year term. They're not for another 6-year term.
Everything goes to 4 after.
Everything goes to the 4 after that initial appointment.
How do other boards handle this?
They ran in there,
And have a bunch of people.
I had the same conversation 2 days ago. That was the way the General Assembly did it.
They weren't going to the General Assembly. They didn't. I think they were trying to not let this happen.
But some it's unwise to tamper with legislation governing authorities. Once you put the ball in play,
They want to change other things too.
Yeah, okay.
All
All right.
right.
Yeah, so we thought about it, and I had put together a big spreadsheet, had a big proposal and email ready to go out to everybody, try to get everybody on board, and then Dan said, nope, it's statute.
So Dan, there is nothing wrong with someone ending their term in the middle. Like someone can say, hey, I can't do this anymore. And then whoever city council puts in will finish out that term. They wouldn't start a new 4-year term.
That's correct. You have only one term, though you may have more than a 10-year term. That's from the case.
All right, so everybody get your paperwork in, please. And I think that is it for the chairman's report for now. All right, financial report. Brian is not here tonight. He sends his regards. Howard proposed that we table the financial report until the December meeting.
We'll maybe talk about the budget, the 2019 proposed budget.
Yeah.
Are you okay to do that with Brian not here?
Yeah, I think so. It
Okay.
was me, Ben, and
Yeah.
Brian. who were-
that's right.
Brian and I got together and went through what's attached.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, so I think when I initially sent this out to you guys, I didn't have the 2019 numbers, so that was really a test to see if anybody else knew it. No one said anything. So there's not a whole lot of changes, extreme changes. See, for the first one's the proposed budget, just for the operating budget. Also, the way we were doing this is I'm going to combine the 2 budgets as we come into issues with having our operating budget and our debt budget, and there's not really any reason to keep those separate anymore. So we'll combine those, and you'll kind of see that as we go along. Not any huge differences. The one thing that we didn't account for was we're actually getting a lot more money, about a little bit over $50,000 from Olmsted, more than we had budgeted for. So that number that you see came in in lieu of taxes on that first page is going to be higher, at least around 50 to 60,000 higher than that. So we just have to account for that. And then the expenditures for operating, which is on the next page. The only big difference is we're not getting professional services. Went down to 0 because that was a line item for 7 Oaks for last year. And then advertising, we increased that by $25,000, thinking about the branding that we want to do for next year and get started on that for the DDA. Added some money for travel just for the education and training, so if you guys need gas reimbursements, that's why we have that. Van, I couldn't remember, so on that next page for buildings and building improvements,
Yeah, so
was that for the tables and chairs?
So what we did was we worked backwards, and the other thing on that second page that changed was facade grants. we're recommending going from 20 to 30,000. But then once we were done with all that, we said, oh, there's still 87,000. So that 87 is sort of part there in case we need it to improve any of the existing buildings like tables and chairs. It wasn't specific for tables and chairs, but we said we've got this excess money. And if we don't actually use it for tables and chairs, then we can always use it for some other project.
That's a good idea.
So are we going to be more active in inviting people to, businesses to apply for this facade grant?
I think we did a poor job. I mean, other than Taylor and Robert, who both knew about it, we haven't really done a good job telling people about it. I think we need to figure out how, and I don't know if Catherine wants help or whether or not
I think
it's
we
going
can
around the community and
just.
Well,
whether it's knocking on doors or identifying places that we want.
I noticed that the Cupcake Lady has painted her woodwork trim and stuff like that, and it looks a lot better. I mean, I like the color, but it does look a lot better. It's bright and all that kind of stuff. And that, you know, maybe that's where we should start looking right now,
I mean,
is that whole row of buildings, and then invite them.
Invite them to a meeting and say, hey, look, yeah, we'll chip in, you chip in. Or the other road that we have this beautiful new school, and you look across the street from the school, you got these, got the little strip mall that, you know, if we could, that strip mall is in our area, so, you know,
That's what
we could get all those business owners together and say, hey, look, let's redo this whole, so that, you know, the city spent all this money on a beautiful new streetscape, and then you look at this ugly old building.
I think it's worth pursuing both of them. Yeah.
That was why we went and Brian and I said, why don't we up it to 30,000?
Yeah.
That way we have a little bit more to entice them with.
Okay. Does our,
But I'm sorry, but the 50,000 she mentioned is not in this budget. So, I mean, I think for now, Catherine just put it, unless someone has some expenditure that they think we need to spend on, put it with the 87,000, you know, just drop it in there. And so we'd actually have over 100,000 available for repairs.
so I know we've got this under new business, the Olmsted annual report and administrative fee, and what you're saying is the $50,000 extra from Olmsted, not extra, but unanticipated, is not in the budget.
We did, when we did the budget, we didn't know about that 50,000.
Yeah, that'll basically show up in the operating fund balance for the final.
Okay. And then we may revisit this budget here in a couple minutes when we talk about the SLX annual report and administrative fee issue as well.
That we estimated.
We added that.
Okay, so that's
So
in
that's
there.
in there.
Okay.
And then just for the debt service, which is the next few pages, we just have for revenues, we have rents and royalties just going down a little bit, just in case, because of the Chambay audit conversion. Big changes there as far as the expenditures go. Insurance went down to 0 just because we moved that into operating, since we're going to be combining the two. We lowered utilities, because the only utility we're paying is water at Women's Center. And then same thing, working backwards, we put some money into building improvements. But,
There's actually, we're paying the water bill for the women's
we
center.
are,
Is there a leak or something? We know it's in there.
Yes, that's correct. Laura and I are still working on getting it.
I've tried several times to reach out to them. They're supposed to cut it off and have that yet. Okay.
That kind of,
Anything else, Dan?
no. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for going through that. I think this is a much more functional budget than we had in past years, so thank you for redoing this. Do we need to take this under advisement and then approve it next month, or do we need to approve it tonight?
That's next month. I'll finalize it.
Yeah, finalize
for
it.
next month.
Got it, okay. Does anybody have any more questions about the proposed budget? All right, let's put it on the agenda for next month. All right, moving on to old business. First item is the parking study.
Yes.
Yes.
So I asked Casey Jones, who's here, I asked him to come in from Idaho, where he's based, to present because he's the one who's had the most influence and done the most work on the study versus the other two gentlemen that came, presented, and answered questions beforehand. And after last month's meeting, we had a phone call, we talked about just the concerns that were there, and I think he's very well equipped to kind of articulate the overall look at the plan and any questions and concerns that you all had. So he does have a brief PowerPoint, so Ben, if you don't mind pulling over that HDMI table.
Thank you.
While you're up there, Ben, is there some water in the refrigerator? Thank you so much.
I'm gonna stand right here if I can.
Would you mind if you maybe either do some way so I can, because I can get you on the camera.
I'm the least important person
Well,
in this video. Thank you very much for your time. I know you have a packed agenda. And let me start by saying, I cringed a little bit to see this as old business. My travel schedule just didn't permit me to be here last time, so I really apologize for that. And I think the cold weather is my penalty for not being here sooner. My name is Casey Jones. I'm Vice President with Timothy Haas and Associates. The folks that were here before have not spent as much time on this study as I have. So, and again, if I had been able to be here, I would have. So I apologize that it's been another month. The benefit of another month, in the way that I am, is I set the report aside after we delivered our final draft and then looked back at it and said, okay, we can do better. So that's the promise that we have a couple of pieces of refinement to do here still on the study. But let me just briefly share with you the objectives. This was not a horribly complex study by any stretch. It didn't have to be, though I think the outcome here and the findings and certainly the recommendations are going to be important for you downstream and even more immediately. But the study objectives really were a supply and demand analysis, sort of typical kind of utilization study for on and off street parking. And then the second piece, operational recommendations, is a whole variety of recommendations from technology to marketing, communications, staffing, organizational alignment. There's really a lot. Anybody that's spent time in parking will sort of learn over time that it does get to be fairly complicated. I give you a lot of credit for taking this issue up now. It really shows your vision and where you want your community to be and the importance of parking access and mobility to your future success. So I really commend you for that. Just briefly, our methodology here, we had several days of sort of observations, field work. It's how we get familiar with the community. We had one formal day of data collection in the field, and we supplemented that a bit post this first day. October the 4th was Thursday, was our day of observation. So we're counting, really taking account of where vehicles were parked, etc. We had meetings with the city and then at least one stakeholder meeting that had to do with Pierce Drive location and parking challenges specific to Pierce. We also conducted a policy review. So, key findings. There's about 600 parking spaces in the downtown area, in the study area itself. A little less than half is on-street. The other half, or the other portion being 58% is off-street parking, both in private and publicly owned parking. The city controls 63% of that supply, which is a very good thing for you moving forward, both in on and off-street. You have a supply to work with, and then certainly the private sector partners. There are recommendations in here how you might be able to maximize use of those facilities in partnership as well. Presently, the aggregate demand in the downtown area, and this is peak demand, so it means for our study period, when was the most amount of parking spaces that were utilized in the study area, and it peaked at 45% for on-street spaces and 50% for off-street spaces. So we also noticed, of course, that there are areas of concentration where there's significant, if you looked at it in a sort of microcosm, there's much more demand. And I think that's addressable by some policy changes, maybe some sort of, we'll get into those in a bit. I think this isn't a big surprise. Over time, you have some restrictions from your parking management strategies right now range on street from no time limits at all, 2-hour limits and 4-hour limits. And as the complexion of the downtown changes over time, then if the parking management strategies don't keep up, you have a bit of a misalignment. And that's what we've noticed in some of the areas. It's not egregious, but this is the piece that we are going to add in our study, that we looked at some maps side to side and we said, okay, there's a bit of a misalignment here. As I noted, you have pockets of high demand, concentration, and if you looked at those by themselves, you'd say, gosh, look at that, that's 90% or greater of occupancy at the peak, and those can be addressed with the recommendations that follow. There's limited signage, there isn't cohesive branding, there's not a communication about access and mobility right now, but again, something that's easily addressable. So shifting gears just briefly into the key recommendations. The organizational structure and where parking is managed, from what unit and what sort of overarching strategies and goals is important. And right now it's sort of bifurcated in a way. We recommend that the parking operations are consolidated under the auspices of the Development Authority. And the reason that's so important, we think, is that it really aligns parking management and mobility with larger economic and community development strategies. It puts those two things together. Access and mobility is a supporting kind of activity for economic and community development. There's really no other major reason. There's certainly public safety reasons for parking management, but overarching, this really should be in the Development Authority. And that means moving enforcement, the whole unit under the Development Authority. Downtown Development Authority, thank you. We think the program now as it is, we imagine from our interviews that enforcement in particular is an ancillary function, which means that there's not a consistency and not a predictability about how the parking the resources are managed. So between 1 and 1.5 full-time equivalents, we think is appropriate for the number of parking spaces that you have, and will allow you to really set the tone, really manage the parking program in a much more proactive way, and not as a secondary function to something else. That's not a criticism of public safety at all. Public safety, every day that goes by, there's more and more responsibilities. It's just natural that parking management might get pushed to the back burner. It just is. But for economic and community development to succeed, we think it's something that needs attention day in and day out. You're at a perfect point because you don't have a bunch of operational kind of history that binds you to start your parking program off on the right foot, and that is, in our opinion, to develop program guiding principles. It's not hard in parking management to get really wrapped up in the minutia, the sort of daily kind of decision making, and should we put a sign here, should it be over here, what color should it be, and all of those things. And miss the strategic kinds of things that can be your guideposts moving forward. This will help you in those difficult decisions, community decisions about one policy over another policy as it relates to parking management, developing guiding principles. And we've offered a set of them as a starting point for you to consider. But it's not as meaningful for me to give you guiding principles as it is for you to develop them on your own, because they have to be yours and they have to articulate your values and your objectives. But we think this is one of the most important things that you can spend time doing. If the parking program were to come to the Downtown Development Authority, this would be our priority recommendation, is to develop those guiding principles. This is more of a tactical thing, and on our final report to you, we will have some recommendation about some adjustments in your time restrictions now that match up more closely with the demonstrated demand that we saw. And there's really only 2 existing locations, and I have a map in here just so I don't leave you hanging here. There's 2 existing locations, and then one that I think will likely be necessary once the streetscape improvements are done along Peachtree Road. We could tell right away that there was a group of private property owners and interests that want to participate and be fully vested in everything that the city's doing and the Downtown Development Authority is doing as well. And we think you're primed for shared use parking partnerships. Those can take a lot of different forms. I think Pierce is probably one where that might be a really good starting point just because the demand is so acute right there. But the authority's participation maybe in capital improvements and some sort of permit management on behalf of the private property interests, it can all be done by arrangement, by agreement, and that could be a really good and important place for you to start. Show how you can work together. On the other side of it, we've recommended marketing and communications that absolutely can include the private sector resources, private parking resources as well. The public really doesn't care so much if it's public or private from a branding standpoint at all. And it's in your best interest, I think, to sort of collaborate as much as possible and sort of pull all of those resources together in a cohesive way. Shared use arrangements can help you do that so that those private property owners who rely on parking during the day can release that for use during the nighttime. That sort of thing is definitely possible. And I mentioned this before, but this branding, marketing, communication, wayfinding, signage, all of that is especially important for you because there are these acute places where demand is very high, but then very close by is almost no demand whatsoever. So if you can redistribute those parkers using some of these, parking management, sort of changing the restrictions, but also just communicating where's the next most available parking can help you spread the demand across your inventory of supply. And then I think, we started this thinking, maybe, we wanted to see if you were ready for on-street paid parking. But I think our conclusion is that right now your demand isn't quite there yet, so we wouldn't want to be premature in moving that recommendation forward. But definitely monitoring your demand, maybe having some of these simple utilization studies done every 6 months or every 9 months, or certainly as development occurs, to say, okay, where are we at now? Are we getting closer to it? We've given you some models in the report that kind of help you see where are the trigger points, what makes sense. So it's much more of a rationalized kind of approach to it, rather than, the city just wants to make money, so we're going to throw up meters and then it's going to kill downtown. That is to be avoided at all costs. But if you can sort of rationalize it based on demonstrated demand and say, now this parking management strategy is appropriate for this level of sustained demand, then you're much better position of aligning your parking management strategies with reality on the ground. So I think with that, this is and I'm sorry, this is difficult to see up close, but the zones on the right-hand side, those circled zones, are the ones where the demand doesn't really match the parking management strategies that are on the right. So if I may just, so the closest to the post office, and that's the first circle to the right, those 10 spaces, and it's not a lot of spaces, but they're at or above what we would consider effective occupancy. They're maxed out. But those happen to be zero restrictions. There's no time restrictions on those on-street spaces, none. Now, there may be political reasons for you to keep it that way, right? The use, why people are going there in the first place, but it's certainly something that we would look at just based on demonstrated demand. And then the 39, the one to the left, and that is a little off, and then the one in the middle is, I think, going to change significantly once your streetscape improvements are in place, because your supply will shrink pretty considerably. I don't know the number, I haven't looked at that drawing, but the number of spaces that are there now and angled will be reduced significantly, so your demand is going to change. I'd target that area.
Cut it in half.
Cut in half. So that's probably, given what's there, the activity that's there and adjacent to it, that will be a place that'll require probably 2-hour restriction. So that concludes my formal presentation. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So is it typical that if we hire a manager and 1.5 full-time employees, does that end up paying for itself?
It won't pay for itself now, because you really don't have a revenue stream. And I don't count citation revenue as income. I think that's a sort of dangerous position to get yourself in, right? But until you have the demand such that paid on-street parking is warranted, you're going to be in the red for a period of time, and that's difficult, but that's just a necessary. It's just a necessary place where you're going to find yourself.
What do we need to do at this point? Are we getting to a point where we need to approve a parking study? Is this the final draft that's in?
So we don't have the final draft, in case you want to add, is it this map that you were talking about? That's
right.
not.
It's because this brief discussion, which will not take, the flight home, I'll have it finished.
So we can, I guess, the board can vote on it this.
Bob, you have a...
Well, I just,
No, no.
I'm Bob Boyles. My firm was engaged in the master developer that engaged you all on this, and thank you for coming all the way from Idaho to meet with us and walk through this. I think 2 questions that I have. What is, in your mind, what is the threshold that allows you to move, in terms of demand, that allows you to move to a paid parking system? Atlanta already has implemented in many of our downtown and smaller downtowns like this one, have instituted paid parking via, what's the mobile app now? Park Mobile. There's two that are very commonly used, but Park Mobile is the most common, and the public seems to be accepting it. Right. And so the question is, on the revenue side, when do you feel like you hit that threshold? And then the second thing is, when you overlay the new plan, the current plan, Broad Street corridor, which will take away a significant portion of the parking in that furthest right area, and replace it with public space, and with the idea that we're going to move that parking into a deck or other on-street parking that's going to be built. Is that a catalytic event that allows you to move the market along with additional retail and other things? Is that a catalytic event that allows you to move to it can be a modest pay, but still a pay system?
So it is a catalytic event. And I guess the other thing to think about here and remember is, the age-old way that we managed parking was sort of one size fits all and then just regulate everything all at once in the same way. We have tools at our disposal now, technology, new ways of thinking, that we don't have to do it that way. So I don't think you have to get to a point where you're at 65% peak occupancy across this entire study area before you can move ahead with some kind of paid environment. I don't think that at all. So I would be paying attention to, I would really focus my attention on the main, the Peachtree Road here, the main corridor, especially as those developments occur. Things change dramatically. That may be, that's the logical place to begin with some kind of paid environment. And then, these other sort of, these roadways can remain unregulated or time regulated. So we've given you that stratification of parking management strategies that should work in tandem, right? So paid parking in one place, but adjacent to it might be time restricted, and then outside of that may be free. You should be offering a range of price options, including free if you can, if the demand is simply not there. Your first question was really about
what's the threshold percentage, peak demand or peak usage that usually pushes one towards paying, requiring people to pay?
I think if you're at the 65% level pretty consistently, I think that is, you're getting really close.
And my guess is if we do another, observation study in a year or 2 years, peers, those points that are up to around 50% during their peak hours will probably start pushing at 65. And so if that continues in that same trajectory, those are probably the areas that will end up getting meters first. But we'll have to look closely as the towns are getting looked at the same way. So I think there's kind of like those 3 pockets that will probably have paid first and then kind of ripple out from there.
And it really, and we looked at that study and we said, okay, the strategy there should be really some amount of structured parking, because it will be easier to do in a bigger development like that, mixed-use development, especially if new parking demand, obviously will come along with it. In the core here, on-street parking, very close, very walkable to the sort of commercial corridor here. That's how we see the two things fitting together really well. And so, I looked at that study, and I don't know how much parking will come along with it compared to what the plan calls for. So I think that'll, the actual number of parking spaces added will definitely impact what happens in terms of demand farther into the core. But I think 65%, if you're hitting that number fairly frequently, then you're getting close. We, just as a side note, we did suggest, you have a range of technology options in front of you too, and you mentioned pay by phone. And we chatted about that early on. We included that as well as more of a traditional smart meter, credit card capable kind of meter. So those options are in front of you. There are some places that have just implemented pay by phone, but because of they're sort of limited and controlled, because the prevailing opinion for us in our industry is that patrons still require some number of options. That I don't know who they are, but some people don't have smartphones, right? And I'm not being I don't mean to pass that up. There certainly are people that require access that don't have credit cards, don't have phones, and so we have to pay attention to that. And one way that you could do that is you could have pay-by-phone zones, and it has to make sense. It has to be legible, right? So you could have pay-by-phone zones on these streets, for example, or in lots, publicly owned lots, and then have meters, along the core, or vice versa. So something that
you can combine the technology too. Like
you sure can.
City of Atlanta does it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But I guess the point of going with pay-by-phone only zones is obviously that you're limiting your capital costs significantly in doing that. The trade-off is some of your patrons are going to say, that's not a method that works for me. So then what do you do? So you have to find a way to accommodate them. But you're right. in most cities, they do that very thing. They combine both of them because, people want multiple options, and it's the pay by phone, there's zero capital costs associated with that.
I mean, what we've actually found that a lot of our buildings is people now that they've gotten used to no gatekeepers there collecting cash or taking a credit card, they really consider it a nuisance to have a person there. They'd rather just run the slot, run the card through.
Right.
And I think that is slowly taking hold even with people my age.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, some places like Washington D.C. has this huge pay-by-phone rate, usage rate. It's in the 80%. And other places, it's still in the 5 or 10% utilization. And a lot has to do with marketing and communication and branding and all of that stuff that was wrapped up in that recommendation that we also made.
Councilman Hogan, I know had a
I was can you speak to what you project the impact of ride-sharing services to have on the demand in the future for parking spaces?
That's a fantastic question. I wish I was, let me start by this giant disclaimer, and that is there's not a lot of research out there yet. We are definitely paying attention to this, ride shares and TNCs and the impact. We actually, the bit of research that's out there says that the larger bite is not out of private SOV use and public parking. It's out of public transportation and traditional ride-hailing services. That said, we also, there is an impact, right? Rides are happening today that people may have been driving before. It's not as pronounced as, it's not the panacea, I don't think, that it's been offered up as. And it also, I think the second piece of it is the amount of congestion in our city streets that, and I'm not anti-TNC, but that is just a fact that 60% more vehicle miles traveled from TNCs. That's what this small amount of research is showing. It's just a lot more driving happening. So I don't think it's significant, nor would, if I were in your shoes, I would not be betting on it changing the need for parking management strategies in the future, in the near future, even midterm, 10, 15 years, something like that. I wouldn't.
So if I'm hearing you clearly, which is kind of a shocking statement I think you're making to me, you're saying that you don't feel like the ride-sharing technology is going to be significant so as to impact the need for parking spaces in the next 15 years or so.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. I wouldn't say zero impact. Please don't. If that's the impression, I don't mean that. But I do not think in an environment like this, it's going to be as pronounced as, say, a stadium. That's airports are taking a pretty good hit. But the big loser in TNCs is public transportation. You're welcome. And I'd be happy to pass on the research that I'm maybe not doing as great a job of referencing right off the top of my head, but I have some research I'd love to share with you that came out of a study out of New York City.
So, Mesa, do you have a question?
I was just going to kind of follow up, probably from what I've heard from your study and what Tom has probably heard from his information on the ride sharing, is that we're going to be at such a deficit anyway that even if ride sharing does impact, because we're probably not going to get to 100% parking capacity or demand capacity anyway, no matter what we come up with. So with ride sharing, I think what makes one sense is it's going to be so long until it catches up.
I think what you're saying is that what would your thoughts be on the promotion of ride sharing as a solution to future impossible parking? Is that what you mean?
But that's not what I was saying. But I think that's also it's not the thing. But we're just not going to have. We're not going to get 100% of our parking demand. I don't think filled with any projects that we've been talking about. I think we're going to always have gaps. So ride sharing will help bridge that gap between 100% and whatever, and it'll take a while before we get to the point where we're like, our parking is half empty all the time, because I just don't think, I think we're growing faster than we can build parking, I guess is what.
Yeah, and I mean, especially if the next step for you, just by virtue of your, the land use is structured parking.
Right.
That's expensive. That's really expensive. Maybe just roughly $20,000 a space to build.
But I do like ride sharing, I don't know if there's a program yet available where the city of Chamblee would say, ride to take Uber to Chamblee, we'll pay the first $3, $4, $5, and to get downtown, if that's your destination. And those are, that's certainly something that would be cheaper probably than building a lot of parking too.
It might be. Yeah, I mean,
you could do a lot of $3 rides or $5 off rides before you come up with the structured parking so it would cost.
That's true. And I personally, I promote a multimodal set of solutions. I think that's what your customers want. People that frequent Chamblee, young people, that's what they want. They want a suite of options, and they want it to be fairly easy. So I do not promote a unimodal over parking, and I was probably the first, I said, I don't think you need paid parking yet, right? Let's use the resources as effectively as we can so that you can put that off. And so, so I think the best thing for you to do as far as TNCs go would be to work to develop policy so that it doesn't have significant adverse impacts. And then on the incentive side, there are some creative programs where it might be seen as a piece of your mobility set of solutions, right? You don't want any more traffic and congestion. That's the antithesis of what you're after in terms of economic development. You really aren't. So getting ahead of that, is this really wise move. Having policy in place that can help regulate curb management so that the TNCs can play their part, but not to the detriment of everybody that wants to come to Chamblee.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for being a month
Oh, no, it's not a problem. So we'll get a final parking study.
We'll vote on it in December, and I think next steps are figuring out how we want to, so they have, in the study, they have initial 1-year implementation plan. So I think that's something that this board needs to look at, kind of strategize how we want to take that on.
Okay.
Why do we need to vote on the report?
Just to adopt the plan.
We're voting to adopt the report.
Adopt the report. Is it to adopt a set of recommendations that we will then implement, or to acknowledge that?
To acknowledge that it's like an official parking
Yeah, I
study.
think, yeah.
Okay.
How does this parking study coordinate with our transportation plan?
So it will be factored in. I've already sent and drafted it to Stantec, who's working. And so it'll be a part of it, work around it, the transportation plan, so become more comprehensive.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting us give service to you. Thank you.
Next item under old business is the vintage parking lot fence repairs.
Yes, so please don't hate me on this one, but the reason why this is old and kind of new business is because last month you all approved about $22,000 to fix the fence. Apparently that was only for one section.
22,000?
2,200.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I wouldn't hate it.
Okay, well, maybe the sale will be easier when I said that. That was only one part of the fence. Then they came back with a second proposal for the other part that was damaged. And that, I think that was, I believe that's the part that if someone ran into it with a car. And so that would be an additional $2,100. Now,
What we already approved.
on top of what you already approved. Now, I've had some rumblings from staff saying, that they should just be just taken down. We talked a little bit about it last month. Or pay the $4,000 to $5,000, get the fence repaired. And then I am getting quotes for landscaping, and I'm using some of Georgia Power about the lighting as well.
Great. So we're not discovering who's running into the fence all the time? We out when it's doing?
You mean all the
I
time?
don't think it's all the time.
Is this more than once that somebody's running our fence?
Yeah.
Apparently twice.
I didn't know that.
So it's a,
Yeah, but
this is the second time.
So this first one from last month, that was how, it's been kind of janky, you know,
it wasn't some.
but that wasn't someone running in.
Right.
The second one was someone running in.
Okay.
Then the chain link fence was hit, at the end of Pierce, I guess it is. Somebody
Yeah.
ran that.
Yeah.
So that's another, but that's a different kind of fence too, I think, right?
Yeah, it's much cheaper.
I think we need that fence.
I think so.
Last time we discussed it, we all
You're all
said
with it.
that it gave a barrier between the people walking
Sure.
and the parking lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because otherwise they're gonna all up and down that street.
So are we being asked to approve another $2,100 tonight?
Yeah,
to
so
complete
it's
the fence?
$2,151 to complete repair damage to the ornamental iron fence, which is separate from repairing the full panel from last month.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve an additional $2,100 for the fence repair in the vintage lot.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, great, thank you. All right, on to new business. First item under new business is the Chamblee Doorbell CID. Is Dan Whitter here?
I am.
Hey, how are you?
Good evening, everyone.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me on the agenda. And I have some copies of this. I had enough, I think I have almost enough if Bob and some other folks will go around. So I'm not sure exactly the front of this room. I don't want to put my back.
If you're over there, that would be much better.
The corner. Again, thank you for having me here tonight. And these people that flip ahead, you're not supposed to flip ahead when we do that.
Oh, baby.
So most of you probably have heard of the Community Improvement District in Metro Atlanta. They've been a successful economic development tool for more than 25 years. Probably every one of us has been in a CID in Metro Atlanta, places like Midtown Atlanta or Buckhead or Cumberland, where the new Braves Stadium is located, or Perimeter CID. We've had CIDs developing for, like I said, over 2 decades. They were authorized by the state of Georgia, and they allow commercial property owners, basically non-residential, so it could be office, retail, industrial, property owners to come together, form a district, self-impose a millage on the property owners, the commercial owners. That millage, that extra millage is collected by DeKalb County Tax Commissioner, and then all of that money is returned back to the owners to figure out how to manage and use. So it is collected by DeKalb County, but it is money that is entirely controlled by the commercial owners. Well, why would a group of commercial owners in a district consider to do something like this? And it's typically because CIDs undertake some of the things that local governments either one, don't have the ability to undertake through their own revenue, or two, CIDs can help accelerate projects. And that's really what's happened in the history of Metro Atlanta, is a lot of transportation projects have been undertaken by a CID first. The CIDs have come up with the concept of the project, they've designed the project often, and once you have a transportation project that is, as we call, shovel-ready, well then Georgia DOT and other local government, the local government or the Atlanta Regional Commission or someone else will bring money in for construction. And so that's really been one of the impediments to a lot of our projects in Metro Atlanta, is just getting enough projects in the pipeline. And so CIDs have really helped do that for many years. In May of 2016, the City of Chamblee, the City of Doraville, Dunwoody, and Brookhaven, with DeKalb County and Peachtree DeKalb Airport in particular, formed an organization called the Peachtree Gateway Partnership. It's a 501c6. And one of the key things this organization wanted to do was help enable a CID in this part of DeKalb County. So we began some discussions in late 2016 and early 2017, and then we got really serious about a year ago, raised some funds, and we had our first meeting in March of 2018. So to undertake a CID, you have to do some research, figure out who all the commercial owners are, what their values may be, start a process of getting in front of a lot of these owners and talking to them. The state law requires a 2-tier threshold you have to create a district and have all the owners of property within that district that represents 75% of the value voluntarily sign off on the CID. You also have to have 50% plus one of the owners, of all the owners. So 75% of the value, which you can have a group of owners that represent the value, and then you can have another number of additional owners who will help get you over that 51%, or 50% plus one. So one of the reasons I think that this is really a good thing for Chamblee and Doraville is back in almost 20 years ago, I started a program at the Atlanta Regional Commission called the Livable Centers Initiative. And it's interesting that in 2001, we funded the first LCI here in Chamblee. 2004, we funded it in Doraville, and since then, we've done 10-year updates. And the LCI program has funded well over 100 of those kinds of studies across Metro Atlanta. Every place you can think of, from, again, Midtown to Stockbridge has done an LCI study. And it's really helped our cities, our MARTA, every place where we have a MARTA station, places where we have concentrations of jobs. It's really helped those places rethink their land use, rethink their transportation priorities over the last 2 decades, and really helped enable a lot of good things to happen in Metro Atlanta. So this effort began this year to create a CID in Chamblee and Doraville primarily. And this document kind of talks about a little bit of the basics. As I said, when we funded those LCI plans and other planning here in Chamblee and Doraville, we identified lots of projects. There's no shortage of priorities and projects and ideas of things that we can do with public monies or with CID funds. But that's really where a CID can step in. A CID can step in and be an additional resource to help us get things completed. I don't think there's a need really right now for the CID to start to identify a whole lot of new planning ideas. I think there's really a need for a CID to help the cities in DeKalb County figure out how to get things constructed quicker. Some new ideas, like there's some things that CIDs typically do that involve gateways or landscaping to really attract people off of the interstate through our gateways to come in and spend money or to shop at our, or eat at our restaurants. But CIDs also really, again, try to be a partner to the local government. So on the back of this brochure, you see a orange map. That map is what we call the target area. The CID, we're only seeking to do this in Chamblee and Doraville to really unite these two cities, but also this market area. So really the CID is envisioned to start at my favorite bakery. Let's start at Plaza Fiesta. Plaza Fiesta and go out to White Windmill. And then from sort of at the gateway of Peachtree Boulevard all the way to our new Whole Foods, and then everything in between. So it's kind of these two corridors in Chamblee and Doraville, the core of the two cities, the MARTA stations, and so forth. Now eventually the CID could expand beyond that, but that's really the target area that we're focusing on in 2019. We have had a lot of engagement with the cities, the city managers and other folks over the last year. Again, really feel like this is something that's good for the community. What we're hoping to do tonight is to get the support of the DDA and to include the DDA for both Chamblee and Doraville and properties that they have available into the district. I'm going to have to ask Dan and some other folks to tell us in some ways what that means in terms of future revenue, but the real benefit to the CID right now is just connecting other properties. We want to have a district that is strategically useful to us. In DeKalb County, it's going to be, as long as we have a district that, when we've conducted the process correctly, the DeKalb County Tax Commission will approve the district, I believe, and then we need the City Council of Doraville and the City Council of Chamblee to formally create the CID. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Dan,
we have an expert.
Do we have, in all DDAs that you participate, do you have any DDAs that have participated with CIDs?
Well, you don't participate. There are limited ways to participate. So you have DDA board members. As a board member of the CID, they have to be elected. They have to be qualified. You can have DDAs and CIDs cooperate. But there's not not a formal relationship between the DDA and the CDDA. They're totally different animals.
Well, we have commercial properties that we own. Shouldn't we participate by signing off as a commercial property owner in the area so that they can get to their 50+1?
Where's it possible to, I guess, is.
So participate in property.
As a property owner, we have multiple properties, and so they need to collect a certain percentage of the property owners to sign off that.
Yeah, I have set up a number of CDDAs, and they have been teamed with DDAs and city development authority on projects before. But I've not seen a situation where a DDA or city authority has been asked to consent as a property owner. A lot of times we hold title through these bonds for title transactions where the rights are passed through to the bond lessee. But we do own properties in our own name. We're both the legal and beneficial owner.
Yeah,
I don't know why we couldn't.
Properties are tenants.
Sorry?
Yeah, I wasn't referencing as far as participating from a financial standpoint.
It's actually not a kind of requirement that they be subject to tax. The rules are that you're counting heads, so there's a certain consent level per capita, and there's a certain percent level by value.
Which is why they moved in the airport to the CID district.
The airport, PGDK airport, just jumping over.
Well, there's not any financial advantage to the CID.
But it links the properties on the other side of the airport.
Yeah. And they do, your district does need to be contiguous. It needs to be in the same county.
I was just thinking that we should be signing off so that they have the required, to help them get to the required number of.
The 50 plus 1%.
Yeah.
If there's not a reason why we can't, I'd certainly be interested in doing that.
Is the
I
city,
want to take a closer look at it. I think that you could, and if you, it's up to the board whether you think it's a good idea. I mean, generally it is.
what's the
If
city
you think it
benefit?
is, there's no reason not to.
The city of Chamblee, what's our, how do we
I
feel
think
about
city
this?
council, and there's some here. I mean, they're all-
How do we feel about?
I think they're interested in creating the CID, right?
Okay. What
Tom's
is,
giving it thumbs up.
what is your deadline?
So March 31st is the deadline to have our consent forms to the DeKalb County Tax Commission to be verified, and then it's come before the city councils probably in April.
How many do you have right now?
Well, we got the folks that you have on the inside cover of, including Bob Royals, that was contributing to funds towards the formation, and then Jimmy Ellis, Hal Hearn, Enterprises, Peachtree Pavilion, Guardian Storage here. We've got a number of.
What's your total percentage of consent for the number that you need?
So the target area, which is in this area, is it's about 900 parcels. Now, what's interesting is, for example,
Sorry. Sure. I've got a constitutional provision of it in front of me. And the two different types of consents. One is majority of owners of real property, which will be subject to taxes, fees, and assessments levied by the administrative body. And the other is owners of property 75% by value, which will be subject to taxes, fees, and assessments. So if we're not paying taxes, then our vote's unaccounted.
So we're eliminated from being able to help. Okay.
So in the case of like Chamblee Plaza, we did have to seek the DeKalb County Tax Development Authority to sign off on the consent form. So I'm assuming that there are, even if we want to, for example, our new Whole Foods owner, and ask them to sign in, which we would, we have. I think we might actually need to see might need Chamblee to sign off on it.
But they're not subject to taxation.
Well, they will eventually.
In 15 years, they will be.
Still.
Policies hold a leasehold estate. Some of those are taxable interest as an interest in real estate. Others are use for us, which aren't taxable. Payments in lieu of taxes. Most of our deals are payments in lieu of taxes deals. I think you have to look at it on an individual case. And I imagine that whoever is the assessors who are counting the ballots would want the legal title holder and the lessee to sign. But if that lessee doesn't hold the taxable interest, and we're going to get into that when we start talking about administrative fees, then it doesn't qualify under constitutional provision. Different ways to pay, and we do aggressive abatements, so our leaseholds are usually not taxable.
All right, so if you could put it in terms that this 5-year-old can understand. So what you're saying is the law says that because our properties don't pay any taxes, that we can't participate at all. Is that a simple answer, or? That's what I heard. That's how I thought I heard.
You heard right. The property is a bundle of sticks, right? When you separate it, you have legal title here, and the leasehold will stay over there. So you could have a taxable interest. What I'm saying is this interest over here doesn't count, the interest that we hold. The interest that the lessee holds could count if it is a taxable interest. Our interests in our bond deals aren't taxable.
Well, what about the properties that we own that are not? So we got the abatement deals, the bond deals, and then we got 6.
You don't even have that argument. Those properties aren't taxable, period.
So they wouldn't count as
So tables and chairs, for example.
tables and chairs, the one in the center,
All correct.
So how been through you?
He got approval from.
Got it over from
the cab
I don't think he's 100% paid either.
It's not 100%.
So that brings up the next thing, which is SLX, for example, still pays taxes.
Pays taxes, yeah.
So that's a taxable interest and they can participate.
Yeah, they do. No, SLX
It's
pays.
not 100% paid.
We made sure that they were paying the same taxes that they paid before the deal.
Yeah, for paying the same amounts, but not as taxes.
Correct, it's a fee.
That's right.
Well, if I can make a
Wow, really? Okay.
I requested just in the interest of your time. We absolutely want the DDA to be involved, and we do have an association directors, which I would like the DDA to consider having a representative on our association directors, number one. And number two, we have a number of other situations like this where MARTA owns property. We have to get MARTA to approve the consent form and for the owner that's now occupying the property. So we have a number of situations like this that get pretty specific, and our attorney, Lynn Ramey, I'm sure has had these situations come up before. I would love to just have y'all's involvement, participation, and support, and we'll figure it out as we go. I agree, it's kind of a parcel by parcel basis.
Well, let us know how we can help. I think we'd all be in favor of that, and whatever we can, we're trying to figure out how to help most.
Appreciate it.
Great.
We'll be back if we can. Can we?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Before we leave that, just thought, we were talking about property taxes. Assessments are different. Assessments aren't based on value, they're based on something else, like number of parking spaces or impervious surface or something like that. That might be a little bit of
Well, if there's some way we can participate, we can just.
You want me to take a look at it?
Yeah, I mean, is there anyone on the PDA
Work your
that doesn't
magic.
think this is a good thing?
I think it's a great thing.
I think if there's a way that we can participate in an active way, I think we'd like to do that.
I'm Lynn Rainey's friend, I'll give her a call about it.
And Dan number 2, I'm going to call you Dan number 2. When are you going to actually form that board you were talking about?
So the association directors already gave us that group of folks that's on the inside cover.
Okay.
I like, as I said earlier before the meeting, we're trying to form this CID in what I call the old-fashioned way. We do a lot of engagement, a lot of bringing partners to the tables, both cities, Chamber of Commerce, anyone else. I think Jimmy Ellis is our chair, Larry Callahan, who helped form the Stone Mountain CID and now occupies trackside down with head of Patillo, he's our treasurer. So I mean, we have a good group of people leading in, and we keep them down.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Next 2 items are somewhat similar. First one is the Homestead Annual Report and Administrative Fee. If you flip in your packets, you're going to see there, the last 2 pages are the proposed administrative payment, which I think Homestead, they haven't paid yet. close it?
They wired
Okay, they're
it,
good.
yeah.
All right.
Okay, so, it came in $50,000 higher than we had anticipated, which is fantastic. Do we need to approve this tonight?
It's not necessary to approve it, it's authorized or not, it's the hard part.
So this exact amount is 49,497?
Yes, yeah, that's, I mean, it was essentially
Can we get to 75 cents?
yes.
Okay.
It's a good thing that we had some leverage on that. There are a few
Right.
Yeah.
That's what
You got it. And then similar related, and this is not in the packet, is the SLX annual report to administrator.
it should be.
It is.
Yeah, it's on the back side. Yeah, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't look at the back end of
So this one has not been approved yet, this is what needs to be approved.
it. Okay, so,
Yeah.
all right, maybe I'm a little confused. I know they had written last week or 2 weeks ago and said that they thought year one should be calendar year 2019. And we had a little tip of the conversation on that, where we think that is incorrect.
Yeah.
And year one should be 2018. So this, but they submitted this for approval?
Year one is earlier than that. Year one is, yeah, so it's, they're treating it almost separately. Like they sent this before they asked for the date change in the MOU. So.
Okay, so let me get everybody up to speed real quick. They sent a letter to Catherine, somebody wrote a letter to Catherine, I'm not clear on who sent the letter to Catherine.
Yeah, it was Anthony.
Anthony, okay. Saying that he thought that year one of the abatement period shouldn't be until 2019 because in the fall of 2017, they came back and needed changes to their HUD finance. And my thought is, we didn't tell you you had to choose HUD financing, and you all coming back, it was, had nothing to do with us. And we got the bond approved timely. So year one is what the MOU says year one is. And I believe that makes it 2018.
Section 1.11, year one shall be
2017, okay. So,
Yeah, because I remember when we were negotiating that, they were fighting, they didn't want it to start until after construction was done.
then why does their letter say they want, does their letter have a meaning if year one is 2017, it's already passed? What are they asking us to do exactly in that letter?
I think they're asking us
To waive the fee for a year?
to ignore this, to approve it as starting in 2019, so we wouldn't accept the payment.
No,
So that's,
so no payment, basically.
Right, and if year one is, they were asking 2019 is what he said, so we wouldn't get a payment until 2020. So it's delaying any type of payment.
So, Dan, it's clear in the document, it says
It says it.
an actual year, not
Yeah.
when construction's done.
You do that for a couple of reasons. If years pass, you don't remember when things were placed in service. And for another, the 100% abatement, what difference does it make? There's a construction year. They get a number of years, and they cut a deal based on that. A couple of things. They sent a letter from an accountant. There is a specific form for an annual report that's required by the MOU, and I don't think we got that. So isn't this on the?
I think this is what they're,
And they did make a calculation of what the payments would do to the authority were, and the payments due to the three jurisdictions. And these were payments in lieu of taxes, not taxes. They also say they haven't dipped into the basket of credits. And that's not exactly what the MOU says about, say, I read through the provision in there, and it doesn't give credit against, it doesn't say that you aren't dipping in the basket, even though you made these pilot payments. The pilot payments aren't considered a dip in the basket. I think that may have been discussed at the time, but what I looked at didn't say that. And if they are making a payment, it is going to the taxing jurisdiction, so it does make sense that they would take a position they have dipped into the basket of credits, but I don't think that's what the MOU says. I think we need to ask them to resubmit an annual report on the form that's required by the MOU.
so let's do
That's the
that.
form we gave them.
Yeah, it's essentially what they say.
But I think we also need to
Remind them.
well, refuse to change the year one. Okay.
Yeah, you can just point them to the clause that says 2017.
Okay.
They signed that agreement.
Dan, it's endemic with these deals, and we had it on the homestead transfer. People try to get you to sign things as a stop or something that changes the document. And, we have to do that unless we agree. Dave and I talked about this. We agree to make an amendment. We might or might not do it. We do. We usually charge a fee. Just send us a letter.
All right, so let's get this back on the agenda for next month.
Catherine, do you need this stuff or you got it?
I think I got it. I mean, I don't need to do anything more official than email it back and say.
Well, we'll discuss it.
Does it need to be on the agenda, or they owe us?
We need to formally approve it, the board has to formally
Right.
approve it, and then they have to pay within 10 days of that approval. They've actually already given us a check.
And we also need to police the
Yeah,
requirement to
I see.
make the reports and make the payments. We don't insist on it. Consider it late.
Okay. So, I know, Catherine, I think I emailed you the letter that I want to send, so we'll get that out to them tomorrow.
Okay.
We'll add that they need to get this on form, and then we'll put it on the agenda for next month to approve the reporting of it. And you said they've already sent us the check. Is the math correct?
Doesn't look right.
I think in theory, in their letter, the way they have it laid out, it's correct. Doing the 20% of the total taxes due. My question actually was for Dan. They sent, the check is for both our administrative fee and then all the taxes for the other entities. So it's one check, and I'm guessing that's not.
No, they're not, they're supposed to send it to them.
That's what I thought.
So let's not deposit the check.
Yeah. I mean, how was you planning?
There's probably some fine print on the back where you endorse it.
Right. Okay. So let's send them the check back when we send the letter back. And then we'll revisit this next month. All right, and with that, that ends the agenda for tonight. We're now in public comment. Anybody from the public want to stand up, tell us who you are, and say anything? This is your time. All right. If there's no one from the public who wishes to speak, we do have a need for executive session. Somebody can make a motion on that.
Motion to go into executive session to discuss or approve a real estate transaction.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We'll go into executive session now.
Well, listen, read it all the way through.
She always.
All right, do you have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn, thank you.